Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I'll be paging through and reviewing the slipcase set for Call of Cthulhu Masks of Nyarlathotep from Chaosium Inc. Is this the ultimate edition of the famed globe-spanning Call of Cthulhu campaign, which demands a place in your collection? Or is this a monstrosity you'd have to have been driven mad by Nyarlathotep himself to even attempt to run? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I'm paging through and reviewing Call of Cthulhu Masks of Nyarlathotep from Chaosium Inc. It's written by Larry DiTilio, Lynn Willis, Mike Mason, Lynn Hardy, Paul Fricker, and Scott Dorward. Artwork is provided by Sam Lamont, Reese Pugh, Caleb Cleveland, M. Wayne Miller, Jonathan Wyke, Victor Leza, Eric Lofgren, Peter Stovic, Luke Muzi, Andrew Law, Oliver Sanfilippo, and Nick Nicario. Hopefully I pronounced those last names correctly. This slipcase set includes 2 volumes as well as a keeper's screen and reference materials and handouts. This does carry an MSRP of $129.99. If you're looking to just get the PDF alone, you can get that at DriveThruRPG for $59.99. So let's swing on over to the other camera because I've got the first volume of Masks of Nyarlathotep right here. A few things I do want to point out. First of all, the fine folks over at Chaosium Inc. were kind enough to send me this review copy. Do want to point out, neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share my thoughts about this product with you. It's important that you know that. Also, I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as I possibly can, but keep in mind, I'm going to be paging through the 2 volumes and showing off the handouts in that. You're going to see images. You're going to see information. So if you are hoping that your keeper is going to run Masks of Nyarlathotep for your group, I would probably recommend maybe tune out now or just skip ahead to my final thoughts and review score. I'm also keeping this spoiler-free for the keepers out there because if you have not read Masks of Nyarlathotep, any of the editions previous to this one, I don't want to ruin the great surprises in store for you as you explore this epic campaign. So this is a hardcover, really nicely put together. Show you the back. We're not going to read through anything on the back. Once again, trying to stay kind of spoiler free here. So let's jump on in. I'm going to try to page through relatively quickly. I'm going to talk about this book itself as well as some thoughts I have as far as running Masks of Nyarlathotep. So let's jump on in here. We've got the introduction talking about the campaign itself, kind of giving you an idea of what went on in previous editions of this as well. We get a backstory that's going to pretty much kind of sum up what's going on in this campaign. When I say this is epic, I'm not kidding. This is a globe-spanning epic campaign. I ran the first edition of Masks of Nyarlathotep when it originally came out in 1984. I was in high school. It came in a 1-inch box, like all of the Chaosium releases at that time. I want to say all the content together might have been around 200 pages. These 2 volumes clock in at over 660 pages. There have been some companions from third parties that have been released over the years, giving keepers tips and hints and best practices for running the campaign. Well, I'll tell you what, a ton of that kind of information is located in these 2 volumes as well. So we're going to just pop through, zipping through. The artwork is very, very cool throughout. It's one of the reasons why I want to page through so you can see this, because it demands to be seen. I'll tell you that much right now. So we get a listing of all the key non-player characters. There are a lot of NPCs throughout this campaign. Many of them tie together. A lot of them have connections throughout. We get a bunch of pre-generated characters too. So very cool. We've got this as well. So want to point out that back in the day when this was originally published in 1984, it was a much different time. So a lot of issues that people have had with Masks of Nyarlathotep over the years, the first couple of editions especially, have been rectified. So we don't have the native peoples kind of treated as just stereotypical. We do have a lot more people of color throughout. Now, one of the things that I always talked about when people kind of tore into the original Masks of Nyarlathotep, there was a problem. A lot of times people said, that the native peoples weren't represented well, and they were always, just nefarious villains. I take a little issue with that because many of the allies that the player characters would make throughout the campaign were also people of color and natives. So, but I know there were some, serious issues that people had. I can understand that. They have been addressed. So that's something I do want to point out. Now, one of the things with the original Masks of Nyarlathotep was that the campaign kind of just dropped the player characters into the adventure. There is an important NPC that brings them into the adventure, and there was just, here he is, here you go. And there wasn't a lot of connection that the player characters, or actually I should say the players, had with this NPC. That has been addressed. There's a preview, I should say prologue adventure that takes place. It's actually a really creepy adventure too, that does introduce this major NPC. And the adventure takes place about 5 years before the campaign kicks off. So if you were running Masks of Nyarlathotep, what I would definitely recommend is, and here we go, Jackson Elias is that important NPC who draws the characters into the story. I would definitely run the prologue and then run a handful of adventures that have nothing to do with Masks of Nyarlathotep. Maybe even toss one in that has nothing to do with the Cthulhu mythos or the occult. And you've got 5 years to play with. And then when you're ready to run Masks of Nyarlathotep, then have Jackson Elias contact the player characters. I would also go as far to say as keep Jackson Elias around in these preliminary adventures leading up to the campaign so that the inclusion of this important NPC carries weight. So we're going to just jump right on through here. So effectively, the adventure is going to begin in America, in New York City. And there is a lot of information here as far as background about the city at that point in time. The police department being kind of corrupt. There are some additional little side adventures in this as well. One thing about Masks of Nyarlathotep is it is not a railroad by any stretch of the imagination. Now, granted, there are things that do have to take place for the story to progress, but there are a variety of avenues in order to have the characters move on and end up leaving America, and they're following the trail on various different clues. So very cool. An Innocent Man, this is something completely new to this edition. As far as I understand, I'm 99% positive it is. Once again, I ran the first edition of Masks of Nyarlathotep. I had not seen the other editions since up until this, which is the 5th edition of the Epic campaign. So as you can see, there's a lot of really cool artwork throughout. Now, one of the aspects of this new edition that I'm not necessarily super keen about is that the various NPCs, creatures, adversaries are all at the end of the chapters, whereas normally in Call of Cthulhu adventures, they tend to have those stat blocks, that background information right near where that character is introduced in the story. That's not the case here. Personally, I find that makes running the campaign a little trickier. Now, this is certainly not a game where you're going to sit there and be like, well, yeah, I don't have to really prep for this. It's like, you do. There is a lot of prep involved in this, and that might be a turnoff for some potential keepers out there because there's a lot going on in this campaign. There are a lot of strings that tie together. There are enigmas wrapped in riddles. There are various different factions at play. There are also adventures in the campaign that have nothing to do with the overall story, which actually I like. You will have red herrings. There are also adventures in here that have nothing to do with the Cthulhu mythos whatsoever. There are some occult adventures, as well as, I don't want to say mundane, but some adventures here that actually have nothing to do with the mythos or the occult. So the England chapter of this adventure is pretty long. It's one of the longest in the campaign. There's a lot going on. I have some really nostalgic thoughts about the England chapter of Masks of Nyarlathotep from when I ran it the first time. And there was a lot of stuff that went on that was not actually in the adventure. And my friends who were part of my group, including my best friend, Elliot Miller, who you know I reference all the time on the live show, he remembers all of this stuff from Masks of Nyarlathotep that actually wasn't actually in the adventure. It was stuff that just came up on the fly. You will have an opportunity with this campaign to craft it exactly how you would like. If you want the traditional kind of rather lethal Call of Cthulhu, by all means, this is perfect. You can also run this with Pulp Cthulhu. And I have to admit that I have always run Call of Cthulhu with a little bit of a pulp feel to it. Tend to have a bit more two-fisted action in it than probably other people running very, very traditional Call of Cthulhu. I gotta say, I do not run my Call of Cthulhu games with like superpowers, or there is no shadow, there's no spider, there's no Green Hornet. Although Green Hornet really doesn't have superpowers outside of having a lot of money. So just kind of going on through here as well. But as you can see, England takes up a lot of the page count throughout this, because it is a major location in the campaign. usually, not always, but usually, you will see the campaign unfold where the player characters will go to England from America. That is not always the case. Like I said, this isn't truly a sandbox, but it is not a railroad. It is not as linear as many Call of Cthulhu adventures and campaigns have been. So, excuse me. So the characters move on to Egypt, and this chapter is a little bit shorter. There's a lot going on, don't get me wrong. It is a little bit shorter, but it's not as long as some of the other chapters here. Now, originally, the Egypt chapter was one of those sections that people felt that the natives didn't receive the kind of representation that they should. That many of the Egyptians are just kind of mustache twirling villains that they would run across. And people had a point. I got to say, people did have a point. So we get into our dramatis personae. So the important NPCs here. So one thing you will notice is that we will see those little introductions of some of the NPCs like that. Let me jump back real quick. How far do I got to go back like that? But once again, the stat blocks are all going to be at the end of that section. It's not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. I just feel that it makes Masks of Nyarlathotep a little trickier to run at the table. So I do want to mention those of you out there who are thinking to yourself, wow, that slipcase set is $129.99. Let me point out, first of all, as you can see here, this is just gorgeous, and it is just jam-packed with gaming information. There's a lot of supplemental material here that can be used outside of the campaign itself. Now, when I originally ran the first edition, we played on average 3 times a week. And I don't run short sessions. In fact, back in the day, because we were in high school, right? And I remember a vast majority of the campaign took place during our summer vacation. It was not unusual for us to play 14 hours in a session. Granted, with a break for meals and stuff like that. And it still took way over 6 months for me to run the entire campaign. And my player characters did not end up everywhere. There were locations that they never actually went to because there are a variety of ways that you can defeat the big bad. And that would be basically throwing a wrench into their great plans. But I'm telling you, if you are the sort of group that plays, maybe 4 or 5 hour role-playing game sessions, I'm telling you, you are looking at years of gaming material here. This campaign could take years for you to complete. Having said that, as a keeper, don't be tempted to try to skip over a lot of stuff just so you can finish this up as quickly as you can, because I'll tell you what, you will really miss out on a lot of awesome role playing if you just kind of cherry pick what you want your player characters to go through. So hopefully you can wrap this up within, a few months. Don't do that. Don't shortchange yourself. And I know these days people get together for various different role playing games and they expect an entire first level to 20th level in, a couple of months. First of all, there are no levels, of course, in Call of Cthulhu, but that is not something that you want to do with Masks of Nyarlathotep. So we also have a Kenya chapter. And I got to say, I always thought the Kenya adventures were like the creepiest of all of them in Masks of Nyarlathotep. So I do want to point out, once again, trying to stay away from spoilers, this campaign revolves around the player characters essentially saving mankind. Because if the baddies actually are able to implement their plan, well, then you can say goodnight to the human race for the most part. All right, zipping on through here. Kenya was another chapter in the original edition that people felt that, the natives were all just, straight out of like a 1920s movie, that they were all treated rather, shabbily. There's a section here on Australia, and this was not in the original edition of Masks of Nyarlathotep. I swear I don't remember it. And I do seem to recall that there was a reference to this in the campaign, but it was kind of hand-waved. So there was not like a book devoted to Australia, because that was how the first edition was. It was these little books, and there was not one for Australia. And I got to say, I know this is not all brand new, that Australia had been included in other editions of Masks of Nyarlathotep, but there's some really cool stuff going on in Australia. The sand bat. So of course you've got plenty of cultists and evil magicians and just characters who have no affiliation whatsoever with the rest of the campaign, who can easily be utilized as major NPCs. Now, one of the things when I first ran Masks, I had some early NPCs that, just based on what the player characters did, how the player characters treated them, they became major villains in the story, even though they really didn't have much affiliation with the overall campaign story. They were some excellent baddies that would just pop up at the wrong time. So we've got chapter on China. And in my run through of Masks, this is where the player characters were able to thwart the big bads and their nefarious plans. But there are ways in other locations to do that as well. But early on, so like America, England, you're really laying the groundwork. That the layers of the onion are being pulled away. And that's how Call of Cthulhu stories usually are represented. And it's mentioned that they're like an onion. You peel one layer away, you find out something else, peel something out, and it's like you just get deeper and deeper into the actual gist of the story, the true horror of what's going on. So this has been expanded upon a lot from what I recall. There is a lot going on here in China, and some additional shorter adventures, encounters that you'll include for the players as well. So as you can see, we're at 577 pages, right? This is just massive. This is just amazing, the work that has gone into this new edition of Masks of Nyarlathotep. As a keeper, I just say game master, referee. Yeah, I'm old school. But as a game master, I have always looked at Masks of Nyarlathotep as a campaign that you hold up other games, or even Call of Cthulhu campaigns, up against, and many, many, many times they come out lacking when you compare the two. This new edition just completely blows my original thoughts completely out of the water. And when I sum up my final thoughts about this slipcase set, you'll see how impressed I really am, if you couldn't tell already. So we get some appendices, or appendices, as some people pronounce them. So talking about travel, we got some spells as well. We got new spells. Got quite a few. We've got some new ancient mythos tomes as well. And they're broken up by where they're found. Got some artifacts. So, of course, those of you who may not be real familiar with Call of Cthulhu, there is magic, but it is not like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, things like that. A lot of people don't know magic, and those who do tend to be insane because magic has a very high cost to perform, and a lot of times it's rituals and things like that. So we got an index here to finish up with. And I have to laugh because all told, this has 666 pages, unless you want to count this. So both books also have bookmarks. Very nice. We see that with a lot of the European role-playing games, but not so often with the North American role-playing games. So the other thing that comes with the slipcase set is the Keeper's Screen Pack. I'll just show you a little bit of this. I'll show you the screen itself, of course. So we've got all the handouts. This whole stack here is player handouts. Tons of them. We also get some player character sheets as well. We get a map. So here we go. We've got some player character sheets. We got a cool map. We saw this map in the books as well. So if you can start doing your little Indiana Jones red lines, right? So thought that was pretty cool. And then we have a keeper's screen. It is landscape, and it is devoted to Masks of Nyarlathotep. It is 3 panels, just like so. And one of the interesting aspects on this is we've got key non-player characters listed here as well. And, of course, we've got artwork. Oops. On the back, let me flip that around. It's upside down, isn't it? Yeah, it was upside down. Very nice. Very sturdy as well for the keeper screen. And that is everything that comes in. Come on, you. Why isn't it folding up right? There we go. I was going to say, that's everything that we've got in the slipcase set for Call of Cthulhu, Masks of Nyarlathotep from Chaosium Inc. All right, so let me share my final thoughts and a review score. So you could probably tell as I was paging through, I love this. This is fantastic. Masks of Nyarlathotep, to me, from the first edition, has always been pretty much the gold standard when it came to role-playing campaigns. Always had. I mean, it's just jam-packed with various different adventures. It's not all the same kind of stuff going on. And I loved it. I loved running it. I had a blast running it. So that was gold standard. Well, this slipcase set just blows that out of the water. It is the platinum standard, I guess I would say. If I could do a Spinal Tap and give this an 11 out of 10, I certainly would. It is that good. I have very minor quibbles, mainly that the stat blocks for the NPCs and the creatures aren't where they appear in the book. They tend to be at the end of that section, at the end of that chapter. I feel that kind of will make running it at the table a little more difficult. So let's talk about running Masks of Nyarlathotep. Full disclosure, I have not run this edition. I can tell you that right up front. Probably already figured that out. But I did run the first edition, which was jam-packed. And I will say, this is not something that a first-time keeper or someone who has a few games of Call of Cthulhu under their belt is going to want to jump in and run, because it involves quite a bit of prep. It involves you needing to read 660 plus pages so you know what's going on. So this is not an adventure where it's like, well, I'll just read this chapter here because that's as far as the players are going to get during my next session. Now you really need to, you don't have to memorize everything, of course, but you have to have a good feel overall for the entire scope of the campaign. So it's important to know that. Now, I'm not trying to tell new keepers not to pick this up. Pick this up. What I would definitely recommend is run the prologue adventure. Run the prologue adventure. You don't need to know what's going on in the campaign. It is all pretty much self-contained. Doesn't have really anything to do with the overall epic storyline, but it'll be a great way for you to introduce that very important NPC, and it'll give you some time to introduce some other adventures while you're getting ready to run Masks of Nyarlathotep. If you have been a longtime keeper of Call of Cthulhu and have never run Masks of Nyarlathotep, you owe it to yourself to pick this up and run it for your group. There are a handful of role-playing game adventures and campaigns that are must plays, that you have to have played once in your lifetime. No joke. This is one of them. I'll even go as far as saying that any Call of Cthulhu keeper owes it to themselves to run Masks of Nyarlathotep at least one time in their life. They will have a fantastic time. The books are really well put together, all full color, loads of artwork, but the artwork does not overwhelm the books. Like, there are releases. We don't see as many of them as we once did, but we do see some releases come out where there's a lot of artwork in ratio to the amount of gaming material that you'll receive. That is not the case here. As I already pointed out, if you play 4 or 5 hour role-playing game sessions, there is years of content in this slipcase set. There's also loads of information for you about these various different locales, like, say, New York, Shanghai, London, that you can easily utilize in other Call of Cthulhu adventures as well. If I had to use one word to sum up this slipcase set for Call of Cthulhu Masks of Nyarlathotep, I would say spectacular. On that note, I give Masks of Nyarlathotep a 10 out of 10. You owe it to yourself, if you have any interest whatsoever in Call of Cthulhu, in either picking this up to run for your group or convincing your keeper they need to pick this up and run it for all of you. You'll thank me. All right. That is it for this time out. Do want to point out that the slipcase set is available from Chaosium Inc. And it does carry, once again, an MSRP of $129.99. If you're only going to get the PDF, you can get it from TTRPG. It is $59.99. And I do want to mention that the Gaming Gang is affiliated with the One Bookshelf sites. So if you are, say, going to visit TTRPG to make a purchase, please stop by at thegaminggang.com first. Click on one of our banner ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get a little portion of that sale. And all those nickels, dimes, and quarters really, really do add up, and they help keep thegaminggang.com around. All right, thank you once again for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday through Thursday nights right here on YouTube as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news. I will see you next time, and as I wrap up all of my videos during this never-ending pandemic, let me hope that all of you out there are being smart and staying safe. Oh, hey, you're still here. Well, if that's the case, by all means, if you haven't subscribed to the Gaming Gang channel yet, click right here. If you'd like to see the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch, click right up there. And if you want to trust YouTube's algorithm to give you something to watch, click right there. Once again, thanks so much for watching, and everybody please wear a mask.